There is a place in the state of Georgia where no criminal ever wants to go. That place is called Alto State Prison, formerly Lee Arundel in Alto, Georgia. If you come here, you surely won't make it out.
Stay tuned for Tales from the Toe.
Lil Clayco had a high S-word drive and struggled with rainbow activity. Demetrius Johnson, known as Lil Clayco in his neighborhood, was the kind of kid who made himself known the second he stepped into a room. Loud, funny, too smart for his own good. The streets of Clayton County had carved him out like a rough diamond, sharp, unpolished, and constantly under pressure. By age 17, Demetrius had already been in and out of our YDC or juvie, a truancy, weed charges, a stolen dirt bike, little things that piled up. He wasn't a bad kid, not really, but he had a mouth on him and a stubborn streak that refused to bend. He hated authority. Teachers, probation officers, cops, they were all the same to him. He saw the way they looked at kids like him, like he was already at lost cause. But the truth was, Demetrius was scared of being broke, scared of being nobody, scared of dying without ever mattering. So when his older cousin Rico asked him if he wanted to get a bag hitting a easy lick, a corner store in Jonesboro with a lazy clerk and a half-busted camera, Demetrius didn't think too hard. It was supposed to be easy money. Rico had the stick, a Remington 20-gauge pump action, and Demetrius was just there to grab the cash. That's what he told himself. He wasn't a killer, but when the clerk hesitated, Rico didn't, reacting to the chubby Indian man beginning to reach under the counter. The blast rang out like a thunderclap in the confines of the small store. The clerk collapsed, blood on the counter oozing onto the floor. Demetrius froze. He didn't pull the trigger, but in that moment, none of it mattered. Thanks to a decent camera system and the clerk's wife who came out of the restroom as the duo fled from the store. Months later in court, the prosecution painted Demetrius as a willing participant in a violent crime. It didn't matter that he didn't shoot the weapon. Georgia's felony murder rule meant he was just as responsible. His public defender was a frail, mousy-faced man who was severely overworked. Lil Clayco's mama cried every day. Demetrius sat in his orange jumpsuit, watching the jury, mostly older, mostly white, stare at him like he was already gone. When the sentence came down, life without the possibility of parole, it didn't feel real. Demetrius felt like he was floating outside of his body and looking at himself saying, "I'm glad I ain't your ass, bruh." The same day that he received that life sentence was the same day he turned 18. A few weeks later, a guard banged on his cell door at 1 a.m, telling him to pack it up. He was heading to hell, actually Alto State Prison, which he soon would discover was worse than hell. After him and 17 other unfortunate bastards arrived and were processed, they were placed in dorms. The walls were thick with heat and sweat. The noise never stopped. Doors slamming, men shouting, officers barking. Demetrius walked in with his head high, but inside, he was shaking inside. The old heads called him Youngster, but everyone else called him by his street name, Lil Clayco. Some looked out for him. Others watched him like prey. At night, when the lights cut off and the walls felt like they were closing in, he'd think about that day at the store. The clerk's eyes, the sound of the shot, his mama in court, breaking down. The first year at the Toe was survival. He learned when to speak and when to shut up. He learned how to read people, how to spot the predators from the protectors. But he also learned something else. The loudmouthed kid from Clayton County still had a voice, and people listened. He started writing letters, poems, pages of thoughts and memories. He joined a prison GED class and surprised even himself when he passed. One of the older lifers, a man named Willie D, told him, "You can rot here or you can grow here. Up to you, youngster." Despite his accomplishments, Clayco discovered that he had an issue. He possessed an abnormally high sex drive, which caused him to become a mad jacker. He played with himself between 7 to 13 times a day, milking every last drop out of his sack each go around. Not having any support from his family, nor any real hustle skills, he couldn't afford to buy phone time from one of the inmates who had a contraband cell phone, which would V allowed him to look at P-Hub to get off, so he had to take a risk of getting B11's masturbation charges from the few female officers that worked at the Toe. most of them bad-bodied with faces that resembled burnt baboons' butt crack. After 3 years of choking his chicken got old, and against his own will, the freaky part of his brain took over his eyes, and he slowly began targeting unsuspecting inmates as he caught them going to the shower, telling himself he wasn't gay because he wasn't actually committing the act. On days when no female officers worked the dorm, which was regularly due to the high threats of violence, he would stroke his baby oily snake while fantasizing about laying with the inmates he gunned down. After a few months of doing this disgusting behavior, his warped mind told him it wasn't enough and he actually needed to feel something physical to get satisfaction. Lil Clayco had always been a straight man, and before getting locked up, was repulsed at the thought of rainbow activity. But now, at the age of 22, with raging hormones that got the best of him, he made the decision to try out Alto's Rainbow Market. This market was straight out of an Atlanta gay boy's glittery dreams. For 3 soups, one could get a 60-second hand job. If you wanted some neck from one of the boys who performed the deed with warm water in their mouths and guaranteed you that everything would be swallowed down, you'd have to pay $30 for a 2-minute session.
Sorry, folks, quick commercial break.
That's just like black folks to come on this YouTube thing and look at all these G.K. David movie stories, but don't send no Cash App or even hit the damn like or subscribe buttons. My people ain't shit. No, I'm just playing. I love all y'all. Well, except for them niggas that broke in my Cadillac last Tuesday. Fuck them niggas. Y'all go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button for my boy so he can keep blessing y'all with this good content.
Thank you, Stephen. You're welcome, Calvin.
Most inmates didn't even last half that time once that tongue and warm water hit their pole. If someone wanted to stick their, inside of a boy's tight brown eye, that would cost $50 for a 10-minute session. Lil Clayco's only dilemma was that he was super straight and was morally battling whether he should actually participate in this stuff. But an old sissy named Cupcake sat him down and explained to him that it was okay to be gay for the stay, especially in his case where, in the state of Georgia, an inmate had to serve 30 years on a life sentence before they were eligible for parole. He had around 26 more years to go, and by that time, his lil thing might not even work, so he'd better use it or lose it. After last chow call, Cupcake pulled back up on Clayco and offered to give him a free sample of his hand, and after agreeing and putting the flap up in Cupcake's cell door window, she went to work on Lil Clayco, who closed his eyes and imagined that it was Glorilla's hand working his pipe. After a minute into the wrist work, he couldn't take it anymore and gushed all over Cupcake's ashy, calloused hand and straight. Out of a disgusting Diddy freak-off video, the 42-year-old sissy licked his man cream off of her hand like vanilla ice cream. Lil Clayco felt a little disgusted with himself afterwards, but shrugged the feeling off and went to his locker box to grab 3 soups for round 2. After a few weeks of the hands, Lil Clayco eventually advanced up to the shitty tight hole that inmates at Alto refer to as boy pussy. He fell in love with it and got a job working in the kitchen just so he could start hustling to scrape up enough money to pay for those sessions. As the months went on, it was as if he had become addicted to it, and when female officers worked the dorm, he discovered that he no longer had any interest in stroking on them. His only desire now was for what them boys had back there, and this was unfortunate because there really is no way to practice safe sex in the chain gang. So when a cluster of bumps started forming on his pole, a nurse in medical inspected it and informed his that he had contracted herpes and would need blood drawn for an STD test. She looked at him side-eyed as she jabbed the needle in his arm, probably wondering, but knowing how he could catch an STD in a prison full of men? Nasty ass boy. 2 weeks later, Lil Clayco was called up to medical and informed that he also had contracted the virus, which most inmates called that package. He had to start taking antiretroviral medications and realized the big mistake he had made. For those of you out there in the trenches taking chances with your freedom, but like laying up with your girl when you come home, think about getting busted and having to spend decades in prison with either a nigga's hand or his hole as the only 2 means of satisfying yourself if you have a high drive like Lil Clayco did.